the last few days, we've seen statewide protests in Karnataka over the denial of entry to hijab-clad students in colleges. But as days pass by, it is becoming more and more clear that these protests are not spontaneous. They have been carefully sparked, for the lack of a better word, by some vested elements. And students have ended up becoming pawns in a larger design, viewers. Large elements of the so-called liberal political and academic establishment have done a U-turn. Where they once stood against the hijab and other regressive Islamic practices, they are today backing them in the name of religious freedom, if you please, viewers, and the right to choose, or the right to choice. In fact, viewers, the courts are being asked to junk the principle of uniformity and gender equality, uphold the students' right to wear the hijab. You know of the ongoing case. The matter is being heard by a 3-judge bench of the Karnataka High Court. The about-face on progressive reforms is all the more stark when we consider that over the last few years, these very same activists have fought for reforms with regard to Hindu religious practices and many customs. Viewers, of course, the tendency towards selectively pushing for reforms on the Hindu side of the religious fence is not new. It dates back to the early days of the Republic. And there are enough examples of this. There are many instances, but this latest one perhaps forces us to revisit the question. And that question is, are minorities treated preferentially when it comes to certain issues? And I want to begin first with Dr. Anand Ranganathan. Dr. Ranganathan, how do you see this entire approach where, you know, so-called liberals who had been turning, you know, apoplectic in the face of any custom that militated against gender equality today, are becoming cheerleaders for, I don't know how to say it, but for regression, really.
Hi, and good evening, my fellow panelists. It's a very exciting, so I'm honored to be in it. And I must thank also Mr. Varma. And in fact, by the end of what I'm going to say, I'm going to put him on the spot because he's a very dear friend. I'm sure he'll enjoy it. No, but Rahul, as far as your thesis is concerned, look, right since the nation's pulse was controlled by Mahatma Gandhi, if you're honest about it, we have witnessed minority appeasement, sometimes as virtue signaling, at other times as placation of victimhood. And I'm not just saying this, there are ample examples from Mahatma Gandhi's writings themselves about how extensively, he committed to virtual signaling through his morning and evening prayers. In fact, at one point he said that even if Muslims were to exterminate all Hindus, he was fine with it. And as always is the tragic outcome, the Hindus have suffered, right from Khilafat movement to Rangila Rasool, to Article 35A, to amending only Hindu code bills as you suggested, to school curriculum, to Hajj subsidy, to ignoring Child Marriage Act, to Shah Bano. Every single time the minority has been appeased, it has only emboldened them for further blackmail and at enormous cost for their own community. This is what is tragic. They don't even realize this. What is worse? It has made our prime ministers to go on to declare that, quote, I'm quoting from a Times of India report, Muslims have the first right to resources, unquote. Let us now fast forward to the present. We continue to ride the appeasement horse and yet accuse Modi of communalism. The truth, Rahul, is, and not many people know this, in fact, the BJP itself, for want of embarrassment, doesn't advertise it. The truth is that Modi as Prime Minister has done more for Muslims than he has for Hindus. Let me elaborate with examples, facts. Has he taken control of mosques like he has of Hindu temples? No. Has he allowed Muslim women to continue to suffer the barbaric triple talaq? No. Has he disbanded the scholarship to Muslim students? No. In fact, Rahul, he has given scholarships to more Muslims than Manmohan Singh did. 2.37 crore versus 2.33 crore. Has he overturned the SC Sabrimala judgment? And I see Desai there. Has Modi overturned the SC Sabrimala judgment to placate Hindus like the Shah Bano judgment was overturned by the Congress to placate Muslims? No. Has he reduced AMU funding? No. In fact, he has increased it, including a 90 crore topping up. Has he, who condemned lynching of Muslims at the hands of Hindus, condemned lynching of Hindus, Dalits and non-Dalits at the hands of Muslims or those of Palghar Sadhus? No. Has he abrogated the Places of Worship Act to allow Hindus to legally fight and take control of Kashi and Mathura, their holiest of places, cruelly demolished by a barbarian? No. Has he, like Dr. Ambedkar did, said that Islam can never allow a true Muslim to adopt India as his motherland and regard Hindu as his kith and kin? No. Has he brought in the UCC? No. Has he repealed the anti-Hindu RTE? No. Let us now, with deference to my good friend Pavan Varma, let us look at Mamta Didi now. Did she change Ram Dhenu to Wrong Dhenu? Yes. Did she say Batla encounter was fake? Yes. Did she oppose CAA that brought relief to persecuted Hindus? Yes. Did she appoint a Muslim on Tarkeshwar Temple Board? Yes. Did she provide midday meal dining hall for only those schools having 70% of a minority students? Yes. Did she curtail the time duration traditionally permitted for Durga idol immersion to make way for Muharram procession? Yes. Did she grant 2.6 crores of taxpayers' money to Furfara Sharif? Yes. Did she promise to give land to imams for construction of houses? Yes. Did she pay more than 10,000 imams, 2,500 per month and over 15,000 muezzins, 1,500? Yes. So who is more communal, Rahul, Didi or Modi?
Well, I just want to bring Pavan Varma in. I don't need to ask anything except for add. Does the state bend over backwards for minority interests or to protect minority interests at the exclusion of majority interests? So much so that the Supreme Court had to remind the state recently that, look, there is a petition that has been filed before us which seeks minority status for a large number of Hindus in certain states where, conversely, Hindus are actually in a minority. We're talking about Mizoram, Nagaland, Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, even Punjab, Jammu and Kashmir, Lakshadweep. The government completely looked the other way, did not even respond, and today, well, Mr. Varma, it's being pulled up, and now perhaps we'll have to give some reply, and I can tell you it'll be some roundabout reply. On the UCC, you know what has happened on the UCC. It keeps going back to the Law Commission. The Law Commission sits over it, etc., etc. And there's several examples that I can go through very quickly if you want, where there has been selective intervention while the other side has got exemptions. Hindu temples under government control. You have Article 27, which is being butchered because there's special provisions for scholarships, subsidy schemes, and even budgets carved out of secular public funds for minorities. And I think Dr. Ranganathan has elaborated on those. So, Mr. Varma, how do you respond to this?
No, Rahul, thank you. You are discussing a serious issue of how a democratic republic, which claims to be secular, deals with its minorities. And I think this issue needs to be seen in three phases. Prior to independence, during the freedom movement, there were actions taken which appeared to many as minority appeasement, but they were largely guided by the motivation that in the fight against the British, Hindus and Muslims should be united rather than be divided on the lines of religion. So, for instance, Mahatma Gandhi's support of the Khilafat movement was opposed by many within the Congress party, including Dr. Ambedkar. But I think Gandhiji went that extra mile to support what was obviously a pan-Islamist movement and was regressive in many ways as we look at from the vantage point of history, in order to do a little more to preserve Hindu-Muslim unity. Similarly, the manner in which Mahatma Gandhiji and some others within the Congress party downplayed the heinous Mopla riots was an example where the motivation was to somehow preserve Hindu-Muslim unity against the British forces. Now, the second phase was post-independence, when certain actions were taken still inspired by this first phase, like, for instance, the amendment of the Hindu personal law, while the personal law of the minorities was left untouched. You had a situation subsequently with the Shahbano case in particular, where this concern to preserve the unity of the country and not have it riven on the grounds of religion was superseded by appeasement of minority solely for the purposes of short-term political gain. And I concede that that was done, and for quite some time, creating a natural backlash among the Hindus. The third phase that we are in now, where the pendulum has swung to the other extreme in many respects, where you have a ruling party that clearly is out to consolidate, if possible, the Hindu vote support, and to take several steps by which the attempt is to demonize the minorities, or at least provoke against it a sense of total separateness, or a sense of the greater primacy of Hindus as against Muslims, with a clear view of political gain. Now, in all of this, I think what needs to be preserved is that in a democracy, we respect all religions, but we don't appease any religion. And to that extent, if there have been correctives taken against Muslim appeasement for purely vote bank politics, there needs to be equally a correction against a political party provoked Hindu majoritarianism against the minorities, which is largely the tenor of your own comments here, which is to say everything is being done for minorities and the Hindus are under siege. I don't believe that's a correct appraisal. And I do believe that both Hindus and Muslims are becoming pawns and cannon fodder for political interests.
No, so then let me ask you, because Mr. Varma, that's not the tone and tenor. We are only looking very critically at what is a perceived bias, which you yourself have admitted to. For example, you took the example of how Muslim personal law has not been codified, while the law of other communities, even the Christian community, has been codified to a large extent. I know what you're going to refer to. You're going to say, oh, well, now the pendulum has shifted because, you have anti-conversion laws and love jihad laws, and you have, perhaps even madrasas under state control now, legitimized in Assam, etc. So this suggests that there's a persecution. I don't believe that to be the case. Can you point out 2 or 3 examples where under this government the Hindus have been benefited? Sir, allow me. The Hindus have been benefited above and beyond the interests of other communities. 3 examples, sir. And don't bring in the Ram Mandir here, please. Mr. Varma, 3 examples.
Yeah.
Just 3 examples.
Examples of what?
Of how Hindus have been preferred.
Of what?
And appeased beyond any other community in this country in the last 7 years, 8 years.
Sir, I am not. You have missed the essential point I'm making. I am not saying that the Hindus have been appeased. I am saying that the Hindus are being used for political ends in order to foster hatred against the minorities.
Sir, if someone is coming out and saying that we should have a uniform civil code.
Let me just finish. Rahul, can I finish?
Or enjoined upon a vote bank to support the abolition of Article 370, which were the
okay, tell me, Rahul,
2 big promises of the RSS.
You want the uniform civil code. Tell me, Rahul, if you have to write a uniform civil code, has the Law Commission as yet decided which parts of which religion
Sir,
will
I am not disputing that. Look, if you go down that route,
uniform civil code.
Let us
so
be
don't
very,
use it
very
as a
short.
slogan.
I understand.
You tell me, for
Mr. Varma,
instance,
please listen to me.
I'm a Hindu and a proud Hindu.
Yes, listen
Rahul,
to me.
You don't allow
I am not.
panelists to
Listen,
speak.
one second. Mr. Varma, we are under no illusions that if a uniform.
Let me finish, sir. You allow a panelist to speak because you raise a question before a panelist has finished. I say to you, I am a proud Hindu. Perhaps no more Hinduism than most of those who claim to be Hindus. I say to you that within the personal law of Hindus, has this government, in pursuit of the Uniform Civil Code, identified those practices which perhaps may need to be jettisoned in order to be accommodated within a Uniform Civil Code? Have you done that? And yet you continue to talk of the Uniform Civil Code as though it will be applicable only to the minorities, and in particular a specific minority. The directive principle says have a uniform civil code. The Law Commission is working on it and has not yet produced a draft. But why use it as a stick to beat the minority?
Now can I come in here, sir?
A uniform civil code only when the hijab comes.
Now can I come in here, sir? Now can I come in here? Because I think you misunderstood where we are coming from. We do know that if a uniform civil code were to be brought about, promulgated, etc., Hindus would find a large number of their customs thrown beyond the pale. So we do know the complications there, and perhaps that's one of the reasons why the government is sitting tight over this matter. I don't know. I can only surmise. But the fact is that it might end some of the anomalies where a large number of Hindu customs have been codified, but not quite Muslim customs. And there are enough examples of that, sir, and I can list them for you. I mean, you have a situation where there's no adjudication of many questions like age of marriage, polygamy, inheritance, property rights, or custody of children for the Muslim community. Now, what explains the hesitancy around codifying their personal laws? It is because, the Hindus will have to pay a concomitant price for a code like this. But you also mentioned, why only make the UCC about applicable to one particular community? We are not spreading that fear, sir. It is the secular parties that are, the Congress and others, who are terrifying the Muslim community by the prospect of a UCC. They are not terrifying the Hindu community, sir. You know what I'm talking about. The UCC is communal because the left in this country believes it is communal.
I'm talking about a political party.
So let me bring in
that uses the UCC to target minorities without realizing the complexity of the issue.
I don't think that is true.
Brings it up selectively on some
I wish we had a BJP panelist here. They would have answered. I think it is, sir, the so-called secular brigade that sees the UCC as a weapon being wielded against the minorities. Who is opposing the UCC in this country? It is parties, sir, such as the TMC, the Congress.
I don't know what you mean by secular brigade, by the way.
Well, sir,
I hope you are a part of it.
We are all a part of it. But there is a pseudo-secular brigade, sir, who plays politics in the garb of sounding secular. And they have done this for the longest period of time. Nonetheless, let me just bring in Sai Deepak. Sai Deepak, go ahead on what Mr. Varma has said.
So for the sake of everyone's consumption, and I think this is something that all of us can do as long as we have access to the internet and Google, just search for the Muslim Personal Law Shariat Application Act of 1937. Can you guess the number of pages this law runs into? 3 pages. The number of provisions it has? 6 sections. And you know why? Because Section 2 effectively says that what is personal law shall be decided by a person who is a Muslim and who is competent to act within the meaning of the Contract Act. And what amounts to Muslim personal law shall be decided by a person who is a Muslim and who is qualified to do so. Which means the area of Muslim personal law has been effectively left entirely to the community and its own appointees and its religious authorities. In stark contrast, 4 successive bills under the Hindu Code Bill were introduced in the 1950s. The correction that I'd like to make is that it was not just merely codified. A good number of Hindu customs were completely done away with in the name of rationalization. And what is worse is that the community was never consulted. Today we are being told that from farm laws to everything, farmers should have been spoken to. But when it comes to Hindu law, nobody was consulted. Only 2 people decided this. Dr. Ambedkar is a mixed bag. And in this case, he completely supported Mr. Nehru in his unilateral imposition of this particular position without any consultation, because the framework was already ready before the independence. In the 1940s, Dr. Ambedkar had already worked on this, and some of his comments I have reproduced in my book, India That Is Bharat, which positively show that there was no consultation undertaken with respect to Hindus. That's point number 1. Point number 2, and this is extremely important for people to note. The question that Mr. Varma is asking is, why do we assume that this is going to be a reaction from the Muslim community? Why is it that the Muslim community effectively is the subject matter of the discussion whenever the Uniform Civil Code becomes the topic of discussion? Well, on a simple question of a hijab not being allowed in a secular classroom, this is the reaction across the board. This is the kind of mobilization that you see. Are you telling me that when you start a discussion on a Uniform Civil Code, India will not have a larger issue on its hands? When Mr. Vajpayee wanted to bring about the Uniform Civil Code, he was being told, no, the community is not ready. And this was in 98, not in 47, 48, 58, 68, 78. This was in 98. Today, we are in 2021. We are being told the same thing. But the one thing that I certainly agree with Mr. Pavan Varma on is, I don't think the government should raise this issue without any kind of preparation. If it wants to discuss the Uniform Civil Code, people have a right to ask, how does it smell? How do we touch it? What is its flesh and blood character? To that extent, I completely agree. And there's a reason that I agree with, which is consistently the Indian state has proven to be an anti-Hindu state when it comes to its interference with Hindu customs. Therefore, more than the impact of the Uniform Civil Code on the Muslim community, I am concerned with the impact of the Uniform Civil Code on the Hindu community, because the standard operating procedure of the Indian state, regardless of the dispensation, is if I have to undertake a measure which is specific to a non-Hindu community, I will not be able to sell it across the board unless and until there is a compromise that is made by the Hindu community. Therefore, since this is seen as a slap against the minorities, the Hindus too will have to be slapped along with it. That has been the traditional position. Name one legislation which is Muslim-centric in nature or non-Hindu-centric in nature that has been passed since 1947, which has the effect of imposing even reasonable constitutional restrictions on their religious rights. None, zilch, zero, nada, nothing. As a lawyer, I'm throwing this challenge to anyone who can actually confront me with this. The one legislation that was supposed to be doing this was the Maintenance Act, with respect to marriage maintenance. And all of us know that resulted in Shah Bano, and from there it snowballed into the controversy with respect to Ram Janmabhoomi, and we are all facing the consequences of that. In which other country, Mr. Varma wants a specific question saying that Hindus are being effectively used as cannon fodder by a particular party. Sir, I'm sorry to say this, you have to correct yourself on this. Hindus have sentiments independent of the BJP and the RSS. And Hindus have certain issues with respect to which they've been treated in this country independent of what the BJP says and the RSS says. Hindus certainly have a problem with the fact that over 40,000 temples are currently under occupation within their country under the name of the Places of Worship Act of 1991. Therefore, the point I'm trying to make is, kindly do not reduce Hindu concerns to a political party's concerns. There are legitimate concerns. Was there a BJP in place when the Ram Janmabhoomi movement started? BJP did not even exist. Even RSS did not exist. RSS was founded in 1925. Whereas the Ram Janmabhoomi movement has been going on at least since 1858 when the very first police complaint was filed. So it is extremely convenient on the part of some of these people to reduce all Hindu interests and issues as pro-BJP, pro-RSS issues as if they are purely political. No, they are very serious cultural, civilizational, religious issues that we have a legitimate problem with. And in every other country, We speak of reclamation of places which have been taken over by colonizers. Bharat has seen 2 waves of colonization, I dare say 3 waves of colonization, the first by the Muslims, the second by Christians, and the third by Nehruvian Marxists, who are hell-bent on propagating the first 2 colonizations and changing the self-image of this particular country and its natives. That is a fact. Therefore, the point I'm trying to make is very simple. This victimhood complex is way past its sell-by date. Because if Saudi Arabia can take a look at its past and it can say we wish to move forward, and this is not what we want to be for the rest of our lives, and this is not what we want to be known for, I'm sorry to say in this country, where you effectively recognize 3 specific categories of Ashrafs, Arzals and Ajlafs, well, the Ashrafs are basically changing, so it's time for the Ajlafs and Arzals to change. If the Ashrafs are setting an example, since that happens to be the epicenter of the global ummah, I hope that particular change translates to change as far as even India is concerned. I just have one more point to make. In which other country with close to 80% majority would you have expected the majority population to wait for 200 years to get one of its places out of 40,000 places, and that too through the court? The matter reaches the Faizabad District Court. From there, it goes to Allahabad High Court, and then it gets transferred to the Allahabad High Court in 1989. A matter that is transferred in 1989 after 1947 gets decided for the very first time in 2010. You get a 2-1 verdict, you still don't have your land, then you have to wait until 2019 to finally get it. This is the extent of patience. So after having been patient for all these decades, so to speak, or even centuries for that matter, finally when the community says enough is enough, we are only asking for parity, not even preferential treatment, and even if parity is seen as inequality and discrimination, well, then history has a way of teaching lessons, and no constitution can come in that particular way, because the constitution is part of history. History is not a part of constitution. Please understand this. I think it's extremely important for us to know that at times a community's patience runs out, and here is an instance where the very same practice has been banned by the Kerala High Court, and today we are being told that a school imposing that rule across the board, not specifically to one particular community, is being accused of bigotry and discrimination, and it is standing in the dock. There is one sensitive issue that nobody has pointed out in this entire hijab controversy. Let me highlight this. We are concerned about the security and safety of girl children. 100% we should be. Now, can we take responsibility for any acts that may be committed against the institution and its teachers by elements who believe that this is a violation of their rights? We have seen instances where people have been butchered and lynched and assassinated on the steps of the court for taking a certain decision. What are we doing? We have effectively put at risk the lives of people in that particular institution by blowing this particular controversy and giving this a communal nature. And I've said this before on another program, I'll repeat this. Uttara Kannada district, this entire region has seen a massive wave of radicalization over the last 2 decades, thanks to massive influx of money from the Gulf. And therefore, that entire place has seen a huge Wahhabization of mentalities, which is why hijab, which was never present even 15 years ago, is suddenly becoming visible, and it's asserting itself. Therefore, and in this regard, I'd like to actually highlight the work of this fantastic journalist by the name Vicky Nanjappa, who's written extensively on this particular subject. When all of this is happening and SIMI's offshoots are operating from behind the scenes, is it truly our case that constitutional rights are at stake? No, I'm so sorry. The country's fabric is at stake, livelihoods are at stake, our security is at stake, and we are looking at the third wave of radicalization in this country, which does not bode well under any circumstances.
Well, that was a spellbinding and expansive counter, and didn't want to stop you in mid-flow. Wonderful exposition. Would you like to respond, Mr. Varma?
No, I fully agree with him on many points, as he did agree with me. The sentiments of the Hindus and their real interests are not synonymous with the BJP.
So that's the only thing you agree with?
But the BJP believes that it has a monopoly on what it thinks to be Hindu interests.
I think
that's point number one.
That is the
point
obvious.
Number two, radicalization causes... Achha, Rahul, you have decided to interrupt when I
No,
speak.
sir, I'm saying that is the
So I
most
won't
obvious
speak then.
part.
Every time
Let's
I
get to the
start, you
meat.
say something.
Let's get to the meat.
No, but let me finish.
Of course, go ahead, sir. Go ahead. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, you want to get to the meat as per your definition of the meat. I'm responding.
Right.
You can't treat your panelists so flippantly.
Okay, sir.
So
please,
second point is
Go ahead.
that radicalization breeds radicalization. There has been radicalization using religion as a tool on both sides of the spectrum. You may have a view on whether the hijab is progressive or regressive, and whether change is required or change should be imposed. You must also have a view from where hundreds of students appeared in saffron scarves to protest a matter between a hijab-wearing student and the college authorities, to intervene in it. How did this suddenly blow up into the kind of proportion we saw it?
The state is oppressive because it is upholding a principle which has been legislated upon, as Mr. Sai Deepak has been saying, by the Kerala High Court and also the Kerala State Minorities.
It is
Muslim...
sub judice right now.
No, sir, please.
So let's not pronounce
now allow
judgment.
me, sir. Now allow me.
It is sub judice.
Allow me my 30. No. Allow me my 30 seconds,
Sorry.
sir. Please.
Sorry,
allow me my 30
I'm sorry.
seconds, please.
I'm sorry.
I'm only saying what is flippant is when we reduce any intervention by the state in defense of a progressive policy as an attack on the interests of a community, whether it's the majority or the minority community. And that's where the problem begins, because we don't ignore, or we deliberately ignore, I don't know, we deliberately ignore the provocation that has led to this upsurge so suddenly. And if you really study it, viewers, as we have done through the day today, as we have exposed through the day today, there was an orchestrated attempt to make these young girls who cannot, even by the law, exercise their own choice as of today. Viewers, they can't vote because they supposedly don't possess the mental agency to do so. The law says this. How are we saying that this is an issue of choice then? When the main protagonists themselves are not in a position to know their mind. And this is what the law says. Till you're 18, viewers, you can't even manage your own money. Anyhow, Dr. Ranganathan, go ahead.
Yes, no, thank you. Very briefly, Rahul, I'll tell you what the tragedy is. And here I would like to respectfully rebut both of my very good friends, Pavanji and Jai Saiji. History for us is either to be hidden or invented. We tell and retell what we like of it, and of what we don't, we scrunch it up and slip it under the mattress like a plastic bag. Now, first to my friend Jai Sai, he very correctly says to Pavanji that please dissociate Hindu rights and interests from that of the BJP. He's correct. But I would like to add to that, Jai Sai, please dissociate Hindu rights and fight for it from Hindus as well. I am a proud atheist, but I am fighting for it because I believe it is true. It is like saying that only gays can fight for gay rights. No. Any injustice that I see in India, I want to fight for it. Tomorrow, if there is discrimination against Muslims, like in the case of hijab, I believe it is discrimination. I am fighting. If you are allowing other religious codes and identities or symbols to be allowed in, hijab should be allowed in. I am not a Muslim. So, that it is dissociated. Fighting for a Hindu right should be dissociated from Hindus or BJP or any political party. It is the right, it is the duty of every Indian to fight for against what is unjust. Secondly, I want to come to Pavanji very respectfully. He says he almost cushioned all the appeasement and pseudo-secularism by saying that, everything can be sacrificed at the altar of Hindu-Muslim unity. I know he cushioned it in a very lovely, eloquent, literary language, but that was the essence of what he was trying to say. So to him, I would like to say sometimes I really wish I was born in another period, Rahul, like 100 years ago, 120 years ago, to the period where people, our great leaders, weren't squeamish at all in telling the truth. For example, Ambedkar, I quote him, to the Muslim, ibi bine ibi patria, which is where is well with me, there is my country, is unthinkable. Wherever there is the rule of Islam, there is his own country. In other words, Islam can never allow a true Muslim to adopt India as his motherland and regard a Hindu as his kith and kin. Was he worried about sacrificing what he wants to say, politically incorrect thing at the altar of Hindu-Muslim unity? Let me take another example. There are two religions in earth which have distinct enmity against all religions. These two are Christianity and Islam. They are not just satisfied with observing their own religions, but are determined to destroy all other religions. Who said this? Not a communal quote-unquote Hindu bigot or Hindutvavadi, but Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore. People must be allowed to say what they want to say without risking this so-called, paragon of Hindu-Muslim unity. It is non-existent for a starter.
I want to get to another issue, and I think those points you make are all valid, everyone in their own way making valid points. But Mr. Varma, let me get back to a point that you raised. I want to ask you, what is bigoted about falling back on one of the most, quote-unquote, Catholic principles, which is that there must be uniformity in a classroom?
Rahul, I concede your point, and it's something that I have been also evaluating and debating. Schools have a right to impose a uniform. Either there are no exceptions to it, or there are, and the extent and scope to which such exceptions are allowed needs still to be defined. For instance, Sikhs can wear a turban or a patka when they go to school while wearing the uniform. Here, the school insists that Muslim girls must not wear the hijab because it does not conform to a uniform. Now, it's a very nuanced, it's not a black and white situation. There is need for change. Ideally, it should come from within the Muslim community and not suddenly imposed overnight in a situation which has been deliberately allowed to become a communal flare point, where you have hordes of people in saffron scarves shouting Jai Shri Ram in a matter that is being negotiated between hijab-wearing students and college authorities. But this fact doesn't strike people. How is it that every issue in this country is becoming Muslim versus Hindu to serve a political end, and how conveniently such an issue comes up on times when there are disproportionate electoral benefits? Now, these are questions we should, as a sane nation, think and discuss. That there is need for all communities, including Hindus and including Muslims, to accept change to personal laws which are against gender rights, or which are anti the rights of women and many other issues. For instance, in Hinduism, during a traditional marriage, and I had one, there is a ceremony called Kanyadan. Now, it may have been sanctified centuries earlier, but today many women object to being considered as objects who are granted out in a marriage to the boy's side. We need to debate such issues. We need to debate issues in Islam. We need to debate issues in Christianity.
Let me tell you.
I think if we can do that in an atmosphere which does not reduce it to Muslim versus Hindu, in a situation of acrimony bordering on violence.
No, your idealism.
Make it an issue of demonizing a particular community.
No, that unfortunately, you can say that it's a nuanced, question that we are dealing with, and yes, of course it is, but that nuance is also lost on those, and I have to say this, members of your party, the TMC, the Congress, the Samajwadi Party, who call the school's injunction bigoted. They've already arrived at that formulation to score political points. So we can't say that, one side has politicized. If you are going to be mature about this, then you must also, Mr. Varma, as an active member of the TMC today, show the mirror to your fellow parliamentarians who have reduced this to a communal question. And that, that is unfortunate. Yes, both Sai Deepak and Dr. Ranganathan, I think, want to come in on the larger point of view, drawing an equivalence on certain issues. Yes. Dr. Ranganathan.
Yes, very quickly, and I'm sure Sai will come in. In fact, I want him to come in because my good friend Pavanji is completely wrong on the meaning and the symbolism of Kanyadan. It doesn't mean कि आप कन्या को दान करने जा रहे हैं. It's not patriarchal at all, and a practicing Hindu like Jay Sai will explain it further. But I want to add to this, when Pavanji says that about Sikh turban and hijab, it's a nuanced position. According to me, Pavanji, it isn't. It is straight. Because does Sikhism, the religion Sikhism, does it have a commandment asking its believers to wear the turban? The answer is yes. Does Islam, does Quran have a religious commandment asking its believers to wear a hijab or a burqa? The answer is yes, 24, 31, 33, 59. Does Allah say that you have to follow each and every verse of Quran to be called a practicing good Muslim? Yes. So all this essentiality of religion, according to me, is nuanced, but it is worthless out here because it is all relative. I want to follow a edict of Allah. I should be allowed if a Sikh is allowed. So there is no grey here. It is black and white. As for Kanyadan, I want Sai to come in because I'm afraid you are clearly wrong, Pavanji, there.
Sai Deepak.
So I just have 2 points to make. In this entire instance and this, on the discussion of the hijab row, Dr. Pavan Varma has pointed out that Hindu students shouldn't have worn saffron shawls. Well, I think I'm sorry to say there is the Newton's third law of action third law in action, but there's something else to be said. Not one word has been said by Mr. Varma on the stone pelting by the Muslims in that particular region when the matter is in court. And the authorities are discussing this issue with dignity and in calmness. There is not a single video of the school mistreating these children. They have been calmly explaining their position with respect to the rule to each of these children in the videos. So what explains the stone pelting? Why is stone pelting the exclusive preserve of one particular community on a regular basis whenever there's an issue? Why are they not able to discuss these issues with calmness and dignity? That's the question that we're asking. I'm so sorry to say, you're saying that all of us are demonizing. Who is giving them? I mean, we are not demonizing them. They have given enough causes and enough reasons to basically say, you've gone to court, respect that particular forum, and let the forum decide it. You've chosen to escalate this constitutionally. Then why can't you wait for it? Do you want to put pressure on the court through stone pelting? Is that fair? And I'm so sorry, sir, Kanyadan is not what you think it is. There is enough literature on this particular point. Kanyadan is not donation of the girl child. The word dan has multiple meanings. I'm sure you've written a book on the Hindu civilization, you know better.
True. But I was speaking of the perception today among many young Hindu girls of their being given a subordinate role in what is obviously a marriage between two equals. And to that extent, we should accept that times have changed.
Well, look, this is a fascinating debate, and it can go on, and we can spend the whole evening here. But the fact is, viewers, that the courts are now seized of the matter, and this debate in no way wants to influence the outcome of the court, but certainly wants to influence the debate around this issue. And I just hope that we have been able to bring, with some amount of nuance to the viewer, some of the problems that we are grappling with.
It has been a beautiful debate, Rahul.
Thank you so much, and I have to congratulate the panelists here for making it an debate which has been worth watching and worth hearing. Thank you very much. Thank you.